Some people who were abused or neglected in childhood have a tendency to cling to relationships, but other people have the opposite problem. They push people away. Now, if you've ever run away from a good partner who loved you and known that pain, maybe you got overwhelmed and triggered by the intensity, or you got fearful about being so close to somebody, and you slipped into avoiding behaviors like disappearing on them, giving them the silent treatment, lashing out at them so that they would leave, or damaging their trust in you, just know there is a way to change that pattern, to stop fleeing and learn to stay happily in a relationship that you want to be in. I'm Anna Runkle, also known as the Crappy Childhood Fairy, and I teach people who were traumatized as kids to calm their PTSD triggers and grow into better relationships. And I can show you how you can better handle the day-to-day ups and downs that all relationships go through that can be so triggering for somebody who had trauma in the past, and to get through that without getting emotionally overwhelmed and needing to make impulsive decisions to leave or lash out. Now, I'm talking about this today because I got this beautiful letter from a woman I'll call Nina, and she writes, "Dear Anna, I've only recently come to terms with the truth that my childhood was mostly void of emotional connection or support. My invisible normal," she calls it. My parents divorced when I was about 10. She was the oldest of 4. My father was an active military officer from the time of my birth until my high school graduation, so we moved constantly between our parents' many homes and my father's duty stations. Every connection was temporary. Every attachment equaled some form of eventual sadness and loss in that sort of scenario. As a child and young adult, I also dealt with rejection and condemnation at home and elsewhere for my gender expression and later my sexual orientation. That's so hard. In my earliest dating relationships, late teens, early 20s, I would cling, idealize, and obsess, probably because I was so emotionally and affectionately validation starved as a child. And that starvation really intensified the feelings of early love and of loss in breakups significantly. And at some point, a scale was tipped inside me. Instead of clinging to relationships, I started to mentally, emotionally, and physically withdraw at any sign that a relationship might become destabilized. They were small, unnoticeable ways of detaching at first, building slowly to blow-ups of epic proportion. Instead of working through often fixable issues, subconsciously, I would begin flashing red, thinking, here comes the pain and suffering. This attachment will disappear soon like all the others. You shouldn't have trusted it. Take cover. And it's become so intense that I've more or less sabotaged my last 2 relationships. Each were 6 or 7 years long. And sabotaged them by combinations of running away, emotionally vacating, causing conflict myself in extreme cases, and Nina says she's a normally passive person, and ultimately by having affairs. I believe I did this in order to create a protective emotional distance around myself and to be in charge, to be the controller, and the perceived inevitable pain of the perceived impending loss of the intimate bond. The higher the stakes in love, the bigger the bomb. It's very embarrassing to admit this. It's something I've felt terrible shame and guilt over. I've suffered additional grief over hurting people I cared about along with myself. That's the thing, though. My subconscious alarm system is driving me out of instinct, even though my actions have gone against my own morals, even though I swore to myself I would never do it again after the first time it happened. I was hoping maybe you could give some advice. Thank you, Nina. Oh, Nina, I'm so sorry. You got a bad hand of cards, and I don't think anybody could have gotten through the childhood you're describing where you get completely invalidated for being who you are and moved around, just constantly moved around so that, a lot of us maybe didn't have that connection with parents. That's common with people with CPTSD, but if you can't also have friends, that is the double whammy that is it's devastating, and I actually think you've done amazingly well. You've done really well. You've had a couple of long-term relationships. You have this incredible self-awareness here. You seem to understand very closely how your mind works, what happens in your feelings, how it's connected to what happened. So all that, you're like right there on the ramp to taking off and getting free. So I'm really proud of you. What we're talking about here are attachment wounds, and I think you know that. Attachment wounds are the sort of like spiritual, psychic, and neurological damage that happen to kids when they don't have parents paying proper attention to them and giving them that unconditional love and validation, all right? You didn't get to have that. You didn't get to have that. And so it's understandable. It's not your fault that you have difficulty in this area. And sometimes I like to think of these as it's a developmental delay, right? There's so many parts of you that are mature and wise here, but it sounds like there's a little area that got kind of frozen in time and you didn't get to totally develop that area. And so when you've had these longer term relationships, the way things get intense at that point, the way you really have to count on somebody just starts to trigger something all the way over. And probably I'm going to imagine that these relationships, though they lasted, there were signs of your avoidant stuff like all along, right? Am I right? So it was probably there all along, but these people loved you and they stuck by you and they kept trying to work it out, and then something happened that it really blew things up. And so that's your developmental delay. That's the CPTSD throwing like a wrench in the whole thing and getting in the way of your happy life and your lifetime attachment that you'd like to have, your lifetime partnership. And so there's very good literature out there about attachment wounds and attachment styles, and those are good things to know. What you're talking about is being avoidant. There's a couple of types of that, anxious or secure avoidant. And whatever you decide you are, that's fine. There's ways that people who have different styles can learn to work together. So it's worth knowing. And you are very self-aware. If you were writing like, I don't know what's wrong with me, I'd say you need to tell your story. But if you've told your story, if you are very familiar with what happened and you're still finding that your recovery is not moving forward, and that's where a lot of us got, I went to therapy, I told my story, and very soon I had already told the whole thing. Repeating the story wasn't getting me any closer to changing the way that I attached. There's two things that did help me, and I want to share them with you. And I'll tell you what they are up front, and then I'll go a little deeper into them. And one is, you have to learn to notice and calm those triggers when they pop up. Now, they are sneaky. Those triggers come up and you don't even know what's happening. Sometimes you don't even realize that your CPTSD came, that it's like a monster. It just comes and grabs you by the brain, and you don't even know what hit you. And it could be a day and a half later when you're like, whoa, that whole thing just happened to me. I got dysregulated. I lost my sensitivity to what was happening. My thinking got distorted. I started to say hurtful things. I did some damage. Now I'm filled with remorse. I'm out in some hotel, doing the same old drill that's happened before. That's what it looks like. That's what it looks like when CPTSD takes over. It can take anywhere from, 30 minutes to 30 days to sort of calm down out of that heightened state of dysregulation that makes it seem like you have to leave. You've just got to get out. And I think a lot of people in this community know that feeling, even when they're the clinging types. Sometimes clinging balances itself out by just like running the heck away. It just runs away. And it seems very real when it's happening. It seems like it's going to solve something. But I'm sure you know so well that feeling of emptiness and remorse and guilt and shame that come when you're sitting in your car, an hour away from home, and you did this to somebody again, and you know how now you remember the emotional impact of what you're doing. So anyway, we understand CPTSD does that. The two things that I'm going to suggest you do, here they are. The healing part is to become aware of that, all right? Is to become aware of that. When you can notice when your triggers are getting set off, now they will tell you, they give you signs, all right? For me, my nose gets numb. I start having this yucky thought, I don't need you, I don't need anybody. So I know myself now, and I know, if I'm thinking that thought, just stop talking right now. All that's gonna come out of my mouth when I'm having that thought is something not true and hurtful, and I don't want to do that anymore. I want things to get better. So I close my mouth and I do the second thing that's part of that, which is to discharge those negative thoughts and get them out of my head so that I can sort of come back to and gain perspective. Now, how do you do that? What I do is I use this writing technique. I teach it to everybody, everybody who will learn it. Tens of thousands of people. There's always a link below my videos in the description section. It's called the Daily Practice. It's a writing technique. It's very subtle. You might be surprised how helpful it is. Give it a try. It's done together with some meditation, and those two together can really help calm the triggers. So finally, and this I think is the most important thing. I didn't used to really know this, but I'm sure seeing it now. The more I coach people, the more I teach people in courses, the more I'm really getting it. Connection to people. It is very, very difficult to do any substantial healing without being connected to other people. And I can't totally explain why that is. It's just my observation. In my membership program, there are people, everybody takes all my courses. And a lot of the people, they never come and do the group things. We have these group coaching calls and daily practice calls. We have a secret Facebook group. And so there's, about 400 and some people who come and participate in all of that. And they amaze me with the progress that they make. And I pop in sometimes and I look at what people are talking about on Facebook. Now they're putting together peer-led daily practice groups. They're supporting each other. They're forming friendships. These are people who, when they first came in, they were saying that they, could barely form a friendship. And especially in this last year, 2020 and 2021, there has been so much isolation, and I'm just watching people like break free and connect and heal. And it's really like changed my understanding of healing, that it's not just something that we do for ourselves. It's not just a thing of like getting those fearful and resentful thoughts out or knowing what's wrong with us. That it's so clear to me now. We are born into community and we can't escape as much as we want to. There's a lot of people with CPTSD who have kind of liked the lockdown because a lot of pressure came off of them. But the thing is, so much of the best of us can only be expressed in relation to other people. And I know a bunch of you will say, no, that's not true. I have my dog. Okay, fine. For those of you who are fine, you be fine. But for all of you who want to have better connections and who want to learn to be able to hang in there with a relationship without flipping out every time you're triggered and without ruining the darn thing, I'm telling you, this is what you do. You learn and understand attachment and the wound that happened. Just get your information about that. Most of you are already there. Learn to discharge the fearful and anxious thoughts and resentful thoughts that when you're triggered, activate and cause you to do and say harmful things. See, if you get triggered and you don't act on it, no harm is done. And you have time to recover, right? You have time to recover, and then you can say something that's more constructive and healing. You can express if something's bothering you without blowing up the whole thing. I mean, wouldn't that have changed everything for you? So finally, community, being connected to other people. I strongly recommend that you have people in your life who are either mentors or peers or both. Peers who you can talk to honestly, who you can be totally open with about your feelings, about things that you feel ashamed about things you aspire to, and they can help give you a reality check. Even if they don't say anything brilliant, they don't have to be, fancy therapists or anything. The act of telling another person and sharing that with them, and they listen, and maybe you being reciprocal with them for that, it has alchemical properties for the healing that you're already doing in yourself. And I won't try to explain it scientifically. Some people probably can. But I just know it's my experience, so I really encourage you. So learn about attachment and what happened to you and what style that gave you and how other people nurture themselves around that, and find a way to fit together with people with other attachment styles. Find yourself a method to discharge the fearful and angry thoughts that normally would come flying out of you when you're triggered, so that you can have a different reaction, so that you can delay that reaction and respond in a way that you choose, and this time not destroy everything. And finally, stay connected. Have mentors and peers who can hear you honestly and give you feedback that you can use to guide your growth and complete that phase of development that got stuck so long ago. So if you have a question for me to answer on YouTube, send it to me to hello@crappychildhoodfairy.com and put Ask the Fairy in the subject line so I know that that's what this is. And if you like this subject about forming attachments and doing it in a better way, I think you might like this video. It's about a structured approach to getting together with people. And I will see you very soon.